I'm Vance Bastion here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 34, Friday interview. We'll be catching up with J. Scott Coatsworth and talking about his novel, The Dragon Eater.
Yay.
Yay! So, let's get to know our guest. Scott lives with his husband Mark in a yellow bungalow in Sacramento. He was indoctrinated into fantasy and sci-fi by his mother at the tender age of 9. He devoured her library, but as he grew up, he wondered where all the people like him were. He decided that if there weren't queer characters in his favorite genres, he would remake them to his own ends. He's a Rainbow Award-winning author. He runs Queer Sci-Fi, Queer Romance Inc., and Other Worlds Inc. with Mark, sites that celebrate fiction reflecting queer reality, and is the committee chair for the Indie Authors Committee at the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Wow, that was a mouthful.
I was gonna say, I feel like you've done this before. That was
It's
very,
on a shirt, but it goes around the backside.
yeah, it's like,
So, welcome back. How have you been?
but okay, I'm alive mostly, I say. So yeah, I'm still writing,
Yeah.
writing stuff out, and yeah, trying to figure out the best time because like sometimes I write in the mornings and it feels great, but then I can't find the time then. So sometimes I write at night and then I fall asleep. But even one thing, it's like, I wish I was a full-time writer and could just do this, but for those of us
Right.
that can't, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's give folks the quick how you became an author in case they haven't heard one of your previous interviews with us, but we can keep it short and then we can hop onto the many things you've got going on.
Okay, I'll try to keep it under 10 minutes.
Right.
No, I always wanted to be an author. Like I said, when I started reading these books on my mom's shelf when I was like in 7 or 8 years old, I read The Lord of the Rings when I was in third grade. And when I first started out in my late high school years, I wrote a couple books. I submitted one of them to a bunch of publishers. It came back from every single one after about a year, and I just gave up. So I kind of didn't write at all for a long time. And when I finally came back to it in my mid 40s, I got serious about it. Um, I almost got derailed again, and I told my husband Mark about that, and he said, if you want to write, the only thing that's stopping you is you, so just do it. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. I got to just do it. So I've been writing now since seriously since about 2013. Damn, it's been like 10 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've done about 10 novels. Got a couple more that are in the pipeline right now coming out, and total about 40 stories published overall. So that's me.
Very awesome. So let's jump into one that's in the works. I should say a series that's in the works because the Dragon Eater's out, but the
Yes,
Gauntlet Runner's in the pipeline, right?
yes, yes.
All right, so
So,
that's the Tharassas Cycle.
yes,
Yes.
so Gauntlet Runner.
Yay.
Ooh,
Hope you guys know Kelly York. She was part of our local Queer Sacramento Authors Collective, and now she's up in Eureka, but she does the art for that and for Dragon Eater.
very nice.
Lovely.
Yeah. And so this all started with a story. It was called The Last Run, and it was a friend of mine who actually has since moved to Sacramento. Authors are always moving everywhere, if you've noticed. Jim Comer. And we got talking about what if there really wasn't a possibility for us to have hyperspace travel if you had to go there the slow way. And so I wrote this story called The Last Run that was about this idea of a colony that gets its supplies from Earth, and it's a 25-year round trip. And this is the last run because Earth has been destroyed, as I do in many of my books. I'm sorry, Earth.
We've had our run.
Yeah. That like some directors destroy New York, I just go for the whole hog. So I destroyed the Earth, but this ship arrives, and it ended up being this whole thing about this alien world that sort of had this fantasy feel, and there were alien plants that were sentient, and it was a lesbian relationship, and I liked the story. A lot of people enjoyed it. I later ended up taking another story that had been set on Earth and recasting it in this world called The Imp Test, and adding some not supernatural, more sci-fi elements to it, but fantasy elements. And then I decided when I finished my last trilogies that I needed to do something a little different. So this was something I was kind of looking around, like what were all my potential projects? And I hit on this one and thought this would be really cool to turn this into a trilogy. So I started writing this one book. It went about 110,000 words long. I sent it off to my editor, and my editor said, well, this is great. But first of all, it's YA, which I hadn't intended to write. It's young adult. It's basically, you've got three protagonists who are all kind of finding their way. And second, this is actually probably the first 2/3 of a book, and you just need to write the last piece. So I wrote the last piece, and it ended up being 150,000 words. And all in all, it was going to be a trilogy, and I ended up making it a 4-book trilogy because it was just the last one was too long. So it is
I love
now,
that tagline. It's a 4-book trilogy.
it's my 4-book trilogy, yes. So there's the Dragon Eater, the Gauntlet Runner, the Henchit Queen, and the last one is the Deathbringer. And they'll be coming out in 6-month intervals. And even though I hate doing this, and I swore I would never ever do this, I Netflixed it, so I finished the whole damn thing at once in the last couple of books. So it will be a regular until September of next year.
Very nice.
Then yeah, I went back and did one more thing. Last when I did the first book, I had those 2 stories I had written, and I thought I'm going to go back and just knock out one more story and make a book I can release as a prequel. It ended up being one of the hardest things I ever had to write. It was specifically about race because there's a lot of racial undertones that go into the book. Tharassas was founded essentially by white supremacists and is now 300 years past that and is no longer that. But kind of like Australia was founded with a prison colony.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of things that kind of reverberate through the history with that. So I wrote the story that was about that piece, and it worked with the sensitivity reader, and it was a difficult process. It was a necessary process, but it was a difficult process. So that finally came together, and this came out about 2 weeks before the book itself. And yeah, so that is the long story of my latest 4-book trilogy.
Wow. First off, I'd like to say you're in good company, because wasn't Douglas Adams' trilogy a 4-book trilogy as well?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So you're in very good company. Dragon Eater is out,
Dragon Eater
correct?
came out in March. The next one comes out
Okay.
September 16th, I believe.
All right, so let's tell folks what they can expect from Dragon Eater and get them prepped for Gauntlet Runner.
Okay, so it's one of those titles. I had a real hard time finding the right title for it. When I first pitched the publisher that I'm working with on it, his editor said, I'm not sure it's quite the right title. Let's think about it. And then it kind of grows on you. I've had people at the Pride events that we've gone to where I've had this book displayed, and they see it from across the aisle and just like walk straight to it. I'm like, what the heck, I have to say in my defense, it's a small dragon. It actually was eaten willingly. It's a little more of a kind of, breaks out of the egg and jumps down the guy's throat thing. So it's not really like with, garlic sauce and butter, kind of like eating a dragon. It's, it's more symbiotic. Well, yeah. So the whole world has kind of got a symbiotic thread to it of the people have inhabited this world, and they don't realize that there is actually intelligence there, and the intelligence there is kind of trying to make itself known. Okay. And figure out how to deal with these invaders, and if they need to get rid of them or if they need to try to work with them in some way. So yeah, so it was a small dragon, about that big.
All right. And you said there were 3 main characters. Are they the 3 throughout the 4-book trilogy? Yeah. Okay.
So I was really trying to restrict myself. In Drop Knots, it was my worst one yet. I think I had 12 point of view characters, which I love going epic like that. But with this one, I tried to keep it just to 3 characters, and I was pretty successful for the first couple of books. I did go a little more hog wild later on, but I figured by then you've met them all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, so Raven is the thief. He is the gay one. He's the one that is the one who swallows the dragon. And he has a best friend named Ake, who's a guard, who loves him to death. Ake is bisexual, and Ake has been with Celia, who's the 3rd main character. And they broke up because he basically stiffed her to go be with Raven at one point. Raven and Ake have never quite gotten it together because how is that going to work with the guard and the thief? And you've got the criminal and you've got the policeman, basically. Mm-hmm. But he's ever hopeful, and Raven keeps putting him off. And Celia hates Raven because of the whole thing that went on. So throughout the books, each one has their own thing. So Raven's got the dragon. Something happens to Ake, which is the Gauntlet Runner, and the Gauntlet is referenced in that. Okay. And Celia is she calls herself the Henchit Princess. The Henchit are the sentient plants on this planet.
Gotcha.
And basically, they were the way that the world reached out to humans in the first place and said, you got to stop doing what you're doing. So she is hoping to be the next Henchit Queen, which would be the next person who's in direct contact with the Henchit. And that's her journey, which is then kind of throughout the series, but she gets her kind of say in the 3rd book. Okay. So each one is they're all about 18 years old. They're all kind of hitting that point where they're figuring out who they are. They're kind of thrown in a magical element. And even though it is sci-fi, like I said, it's got a real fantasy epic quest feel to it.
Nice.
Thanks.
Anything else you want folks to know?
Ooh,
Something
this
I
was a
wouldn't
hard,
think to ask.
yeah, this was a hard one to do just because it was such a long process. I ended up kind of sidetracking for about 2.5 years working on these books. But I do
Wow.
think I think they're the best that I've done character wise. When I first started writing, the main criticisms I got were that A, you're writing novellas and they're too short.
Hmm.
B, your characterization is not as strong as it should be. Because I was one of those like whiz bang sci-fi writers, right? I love the big idea, the half world, the hyperspace, everything else. And so I really concentrated on this one on the characterization. Got myself a really good character book, and kind of went through a bunch of exercises with the characters and figured out who they were. And I think just too, as you work on the same characters for a long period of time, you really get to know them. So I
Hmm.
feel like I know each of these characters kind of inside and out, and I could sit down and write something else with them very easily now and kind of keep that same feeling. So I think that would be it. Is that it's my most character driven series yet, or books yet, and I
Hmm.
hope you enjoy that.
Nice. And I just want folks to know they can go to your website, jscottcoatsworth.com, hit all your all books, and start picking them up from whichever vendor they want to read from.
And if they want to buy every one, I actually had somebody that went through my Smashword sale this last month and bought like every single book. I was
Oh,
like, wow.
wow. Nice.
We had that at our I think it was Davis Pride we went to, and a woman came to the table while we were gone at lunch, and she actually literally said, "Okay, I want one of every one of these."
Oh, wow.
It was like
That's
an
awesome.
$8 order. So if you can find me more of those readers, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
We'll put the call out.
Okay.
Next on our list, you have two anthologies to talk about.
Yes. So I have cover. I don't have it printed out yet, but I've got the first one is going to be the next book. It's actually book 9 in the queer sci-fi flash fiction series. This is book 8 here. So the thing with that is we choose a word every year, and we have 4 of us in the queer sci-fi admin group that go over that. And then we put it out and we say, we want you to write a 300 word story, max 300 words. It's got to be LGBTQ, it's got to be speculative fiction, it's got to be written well, and it has to be to that particular word's theme. So this year was my year to choose the word. I came up with 3 or 4, and then the group chose the final one, and it's rise. So the idea is it can be expressed a lot of ways. We had people
Right.
that zombies rising up. We had people
Ooh.
that people flying. We had people that did yeast and bread magic, which is really cool. Um,
Okay.
you can take that word in any way as long as you get that theme in there, and as long as you just don't basically say rise, 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 rise in the story. So that one is coming out in October. That'll be October 25th, I believe. And it'll have 120 short stories. If you've ever read the Uncle John's Bathroom Reader or Reader's Digest, this is that same kind of material where you can take this into the bathroom, or you can take it to the bank line or the post office or whatever else you do, and you can read a story in about 2 minutes. So,
Nice.
yes, so that's that one. And then we started a thing a couple of years ago called Writers Save the World. And it
Hmm.
started with Fix the World. And that was just a kind of a general, let's do some hope punk, hopeful stories about the future. What are some problems that we need tackling, and how might we get there? How might we fix them? Then we did Save the World, and Save the World was the same thing, but specifically climate change fiction. So of all these horrible climate issues we're having now in this summer of heat, how could we actually fix that? What are some practical ways that we could go about fixing that? So for the third one, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to go with the theme on it, and I've seen some of these pictures, and I'm sure you've seen them, where they're like the globe, and they've got like solar panels and windmills and other stuff, like all this green echo stuff kind of sticking out of them, right?
Hmm.
I wanted stories that had that feel. I wanted stories that looked at society and government and culture and said, how can we make this different? How could we do this in a different way that would make the world better somehow? And so I solicited stories, and for this one, I actually got, see, I think it was 150 stories versus 75 for the last one. And I had to recruit a bunch of slush pile readers because it was just way too many stories for me to try to read,
Hmm.
and ended up with some really, really good stories on the theme. I actually had so many that there were about 15 or 20 stories that I really, really liked, that either they just didn't quite give me that same feeling I was looking for, didn't quite meet that prompt, but they were great stories. And so I decided to go ahead and buy those too. And we'll be doing another anthology, which is kind of a split off called Earth 2100, which is all about futures of the Earth, and not so themed in terms of being a fix or save or one particular thing, but just kind of all different visions of what the Earth might be like in the next 50 to 100 years.
Awesome.
So, yeah, so I'm kind of really getting my jam on with the anthology thing.
Yeah, you are. That's fantastic. And you have one more project that doesn't fall under either of those two genres.
Yeah. Okay, so another controversial title. It's called Suck a Little Happy Juice.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually one of the columns that it came from. I've been writing on my blog for the last 10 years, and it's been a mix of kind of talking about my life, talking about my writing, talking about how to write, how to promote. So I had for a long time been stuffing all those ones that fell in the latter category about how to write and how to promote your books into this Vellum file. And Vellum's a formatting program basically for books, and planning eventually to do something with that as a writing thing. So it's been on my to-do list for a couple of years, and I finally pulled it off. I've got a friend here. I don't know if you guys know Kim Fielding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Kim's daughter Allison is going to Sac State, and we helped her find a place to live in our neighborhood here
Cool.
about a year and a half ago. And she is a proofer. She's a great proofer. She's very fast, and she's affordable. So if anybody needs proofing, little recommendation.
Nice.
I sent her the stories to kind of get things going, and said, "Would you look over this and tell me, what's duplicative? What don't I need? Give me a quick proof on it." And she, in 2 days, got it back to me with, "Okay, you drop this chapter, combine these chapters here, do this, do that." And I was like, "Damn, I could actually do this thing now." So I've been working on it with some beta readers, yeah, for the last couple months, and now I'm kind of going through and doing a final pass. And there's a lot of stuff in where I'm talking right to my readers on my blog, where I'm saying, as I'm working on the Dragon Eater, I discovered this and this and this. And when you have a whole book where it's all like, as I did this book and as I did that book and as I did that one, it starts to sound a little braggy. So I've been kind of changing the tone of it, pulling that out and saying, on one thing I worked on, I found this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And also transferring a lot of it from me to the second person, you as the writer who's reading the book. You do this, you do that, and then you find that this. So
it's more the craft talking than about you
exactly
doing it. Yeah.
exactly, because it just felt braggy. It felt weird.
Love me, but enough about me. What do you think of me?
Exactly. Well, and the whole tone when you write for a blog is different. I mean, at least for me, I write very informally. So I use, kinda and sorta and all these other things and smiley faces and stuff. And again, in a book, it's just not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that is going to be coming out. I think I haven't set an exact date for it, probably December of this year.
Nice.
So yeah, it's basically for indie writers and people that work with small presses, and it's a kind of a combination of writing philosophy and specific how-tos and kind of commiseration. If you've ever read Writing Down the Bones, which is one of my favorite writing books ever, and I can never pronounce the author's name, but if you look it up on Amazon, it's basically she did a series of kind of almost meditations, and some are practical exercises, but a lot of them are just kind of the philosophy of writing. And again, they're really short chapters. Like they would have been a great blog if they'd been done at the time, but I think she wrote it back in the 80s.
Okay.
And you just kind of sit down and you can drop in at any point in the book and you can kind of read one of them and get inspired. And so it's kind of that, but also kind of merged with some real practical stuff like, how do you start a local author group? How do you deal with table sales? How do you write blog posts? So it gives you kind of a lot of the nitty gritty stuff as well. So nice. I'm excited about it. I have no idea, I'm not Stephen King, and so I can't bring that to the table and say, look, if you do this, you will sell 10 million books. But I do know a lot of authors, and I've been doing this author thing for a long time now. So I'm hoping that it'll be helpful.
Mm-hmm. So I know I normally ask this later, but which social is the best for people to keep up with these updates? Because you're dropping a lot in the next couple months.
Yes. Facebook is my main to go to. So I have both my J. Scott Coatsworth writer page, but I also got my general J. Scott Coatsworth personal page. It's the same. I don't have a pseudonym. So that's probably the best place. The new place that I really like a lot is Mastodon. So if you go on Mastodon, you'll find me there again, J. Scott Coatsworth. I was on Twitter. We had actually 7 Twitter accounts for various parts of our business, and we had something, we weren't huge, but we had something close to 20,000, 25,000 followers overall between all of them. And then the whole Musk thing happened, and I just couldn't anymore. So I don't want to get any more involved in that, but I just couldn't. So we went over to Master there too, but just folks kind of generally talking, and it's very common for me to be going through my feeds to look for stuff to post and just find some really kind of fun, cool, interesting, weird stuff to share. So that would be the other place, the other main place. I am technically on Instagram. I don't use it a lot, but I do cross post from Facebook. So yeah.
Okay. And we'll have all of these links on your page on our site so people can find them easily.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you want to mention about projects or what you're working on before we jump into some get to know you questions?
Ooh, well, there are two other things. So again, Kim Fielding, she and I are working on a fantasy, kind of a sci-fantasy. I don't want to say a lot about it yet, but it is a humorous story about a desk fae. He's a fae that works in an office. Kind of called Office of the Lost, about this guy that he goes out and he brings back lost things that may be needed later. And in this case, the lost thing is a human being, a kind of slovenly guy from Earth, from Sacramento, because Kim lives about 100 miles from here, so we kind of both know the area. So I have no idea when that's going to come out, but it's just been a real lighthearted kind of fun collaboration we've been doing together. And then I am working on what I call the middle trilogy between the Ariadne cycle, which was the Stark Divide series, and then Skything series, the Oberon cycle, which is kind of the generation ship and then where the generation ship ended up. So I'm working on kind of that middle piece of what happened between.
Nice.
So it's going to be another, probably a 3-book trilogy. It might be a 4-book trilogy. You never know. But my plan for that is probably next year sometime.
Nice. So we've talked about your upcoming works, and we've talked about where people can find you, and I suggest everyone just go to jscottcoatsworth.com and springboard off the links there. Are you doing any upcoming appearances?
Ooh, yeah. So strangely, I'm doing Modesto Pride. Modesto, for those of you who don't know, is a little teeny tiny, not particularly LGBTQ friendly town.
Yeah.
But we actually did Placer Pride, which is in Roseville, which is a little more queer friendly, but also kind of a more right county. Yeah. And we did really well there because we had a lot of folks that just had never had the opportunity to have this stuff, and this is their second year this
lovely.
year. Per capita, we did, like, our book sales, we did better there than we've done anywhere else.
Nice.
So Kim lives in Turlock and right next to Modesto, basically, and suggested we do this. So a few of us are going to pack it up and head down there and try it out. And then I think that's the last thing. Oh, well, we're doing a reading at the Avid Reader, if anybody's in Sacramento here, coming up in October for the Queer Sacramento Authors Collective, which is one of the other 20 things that I do. Local. And then next year we'll be doing BayCon again. This is our second year at BayCon, which is a sci-fi convention in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was in Santa Clara this year. And just a really great con. A lot of folks there. Again, we did good sales, some great panels. So those are kind of my next things coming up. And we will be doing Sac Comic Con for the first time in March next year. So I have no idea how it's going to be received, how, if LGBTQ books are going to sell well there. But hey, it's right here. So again,
very, very awesome.
Thank you.
Any final words of wisdom?
Ooh, I always tell people this. I stopped writing when I shouldn't have. I went to Worldcon and I saw some people there that started writing about the same time I did back in the 80s and early 90s and are huge successes now. And I always regret not having just kind of pushed myself and moved on. So write what you want and don't stop. It's real easy for us to have one bad review and make us feel like we're imposters, like we shouldn't be doing this, even if we have 10 other good reviews just before it. So just keep doing what you're doing and don't stop.
Awesome. Folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to J. Scott Coatsworth for joining us today. Scott, thank you so much. And it was so good to see you again.
I know.
Yeah. We can't let another pandemic come between us.
Right.
I'll have to schedule another one for a couple months down the road once the Gauntlet Runner's out.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episode. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.